Bunu. I'm the Regional Director for IFAD for Eastern Southern Africa. So I have the honor to welcome you to the Global Forum on Remittances and Investment and Development. The last time we were in Africa was in 2009. And so it's really great to be back in Kenya, where remittances are really key and central. So I'd like to just take this very quick opportunity to invite our distinguished panelists for this morning. And I'd like to start very firstly with the International Fund for Agricultural Development President, Mr. Elario. Mr. President, please come and share your statements with us.
No sé si podemos cambiar esto. Dejamos ahí. Okay. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the forum. The last UN General Assembly made a global call to rescue the Sustainable Development Goals. It called on all of us to get back on track to building a better world that leaves no one behind. Certainly, migrant workers don't leave their families behind. Each of the more than 1 billion national and international migrants in the world today has a story to tell. And the majority share something in common. They provide remittances to their families back home. They leave home so their families do not have to, so that they can stay in their hometown villages and invest in a brighter future for their children. Remittances help families and communities in a variety of ways. They help people improve their health and nutrition and keep their children in school. In some cases, remittances are used to improve housing and sanitation, and they enable people to acquire assets, start business, and strengthen their livelihoods. That way, they are contributing to improving livelihoods and stronger resilience. In short, remittances are fundamental to achieving all of the SDGs. In 2022, $647 billion were registered in formal remittances flows to low and middle income countries. These figures represent more than 3 times official development assistance. Let me repeat it, more than 3 times official development assistance. Remittances flows are also higher than foreign direct investment in almost every developing country. Half of these flows go to rural areas where poverty and hunger are concentrated and where remittances make the most difference to people's life. That is why a key development challenge for all of us in this room is to maximize the impact of the projected $5 trillion in remittances to be received by families living in developing countries between now and 2030. IFAD's mission is to invest in rural people, and the scale and scope of remittances are a very important tool. It is in rural areas that remittances can help make migration a choice and not a necessity for current and future generations. Over the past 17 years, IFAD has co-funded over 70 projects in more than 50 countries, focusing on providing tailored opportunities for remittance receivers and their communities, benefiting at least 2 million people. Based on our experience, we know that given better opportunities to save, remittances families will save more. We know that given appropriate investment options, customized to their circumstances and goals, they will invest more. And we know that if we give them opportunities to invest in education, healthcare, climate adaptation, remittances recipients will live better lives. Many of our efforts have been focused on Africa, we have started the Prime Africa initiatives together with the European Commission, the governments of Luxembourg, Spain, and Sweden. Prime Africa is being implemented currently in 7 countries: Ghana, Kenya, Morocco, Senegal, South Africa, the Gambia, and Uganda. The initiative is advancing digital options for sending remittances to even the most remote rural areas. It is promoting former channels to reduce costs and extend reach. And it is leveling the playing field by improving regulatory frameworks to enable competitions in remittance markets. These are all essential aspects of promoting the transformative role of remittances in rural communities, and we look forward to discussing them in more detail during this summit. Tomorrow, with the occasion of the United Nations International Day of Family Remittances, we will recognize the contribution of over 200 million migrants, half of them being women. These are the people who improve the lives of their family members, their entire communities and countries through their remittances. The day calls upon governments, private sector entities, as well as civil society to work together to maximize the impact of remittances. By taking action to help remittances families reach their own individual development goals, we will be directly engaging 1 billion people in rescuing the SDGs by 2030, one family at a time. I would like to finish today by wishing you all fruitful discussions during these 3 days of the summit as we look ahead on our common goal to achieve the 2030 agenda and all of the SDGs. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is a bit challenging, but we'll get there. Thank you, Mr. President, for your remarks. Now it is my pleasure and my honor to invite to the floor to share her remarks Ms. Christine Drat, and she is the United Nations Special Secretary General, Special Advisor for Africa. Please come to the podium.
Good morning. What a pleasure to be here from New York, believe me. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, thank you for inviting me. It is a pleasure to be with you today at the opening of this 2023 Africa Summit of the Global Forum on Remittances, Investment and Development. Allow me to start by thanking our host, the Government of Kenya, and the co-organizers, the International Fund on Agriculture Development, IFAD, and the World Bank. Our discussions these 3 days are critical, as remittances and diaspora finance can and should constitute a relevant source of financing for development. Since the specific technicalities of the challenge will be debated in detail during these days, I would like to ask your permission to focus this intervention on the political economy perspective of remittances. Beyond, allow me to say in a very open way, beyond the neoliberal thinking, because we need to reset the model and need to bring new angles to this conversation. As you know, this year marks the end of the first 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063 and the midpoint of the implementation of 2030 Agenda. We are off track. Everybody knows. This is that everybody is getting nervous. And if you notice in any UN speech, at least 5 times, the term accelerating the SDGs are mentioned because you are completely off track. This realization is a wake-up call, but it provides us with the opportunity to conduct a thorough assessment, to identify the factors that undermine our progress, and, above all, reset the model. COVID-19 and the ongoing global food, energy, and financial crisis have reverted development gains and undermine the capacities of African countries to advance towards sustainable developments. But let's be honest, we, Africans, we were off track even before, suffering the impact of these external shocks. We were much before off track. I believe Africa has not fully delivered the MDGs, so Africa has not built the resilience that was supposed to build during the MDGs. So African countries' efforts have been constrained due to three structural paradoxes that has affected the continent. The first paradox, a continent that has all the potential to become an agriculture power, but is chronic on food insecurity. Second paradox, a continent that has all possible energy sources, but lacks access to energy and electricity, a dark continent. The third paradox, a continent rich in financial flows, and now I'm saying natural, because natural everybody knows. I'm saying financial. Third, a continent rich in financial flows, but depending on external sources to finance its own developments. The third paradox, the financing one, is perhaps the most striking, as the global narrative has traditional pictured Africa as a poor continent from a financial standpoint, unable to generate financial flows. This is false. This is not true. To understand this paradox, it is important to differentiate between generation of financial flows and mobilization of those financial flows for development. Creating financial flows requires an active economic fabric, and Africa has it. Mobilizing those flows that have been generated for development requires effective institutions, strong country system, and this is Africa's challenge. Every year, Africa loses over $300 billion. I'd like to repeat this number, if you allow me, Mr. President. Every year, Africa loses over $300 billion to 89 illicit financial flows, public spending inefficiency 70, almost 100 billion, inefficient taxes incentives 46 billion, and if we put 10% of the $1.3 trillion in pension funds that are placed abroad, we reach $300 billion. Furthermore, as I mentioned, African countries have over $1.3 trillion in pension funds, which to a large extent are invested abroad. This is again evidence of our incapacity to mobilize the financial flows that are generated in the continent. Someone cannot lose something that before has not had it. It's impossible. I just can lose my mobile if I have a mobile. So Africa has the capacity to generate these $300 billion. Furthermore, it suggests that in order to achieve sustainable financing, countries should focus their attention not so much on controlling stocks, but rather on controlling flows. And remittance and diaspora financing are just the low-hanging fruit. If we shift from stocks to flows, remittance are the low-hanging fruit. And this is the angle that we need to adopt to reset remittance flows business model. Last year, African countries received nearly $100 billion in remittance, almost 60% of the continent's GDP. And yet, we are not able to leverage them to advance towards sustainable financing due to our incapacity to control the remittance flows, where the overcost is the best proxy. All in all, remittances are the low-hanging fruit in this shift of approach that I'm proposing, moving from stock control to flow control. Because beyond their quantity, They are a quality source of financial flows. And I have been Minister of Finance for 10 years. I was Minister of Finance when the subprime hit Cape Verde. And believe me, thanks God to remittance, I managed to save the subprime crisis. 30% of banking deposits and 10% of GDP. Above all, is a huge macroeconomic policy that helps deliver stability. So as I was saying, all in all, remittance are the low-hanging fruit in this shift, because beyond their quantity, they are quality source of financial. They have demonstrated remarkable stability, counter-cycle behavior, resilience, and particularly during economic downturns and crises, as exemplified during COVID-19 pandemic. Tell me, who Minister of Finance in the world doesn't want to enjoy these type of flows? They are the beauty. They are just the perfect that we need. If remittance have all the characteristics that are needed to ensure the sustainability of financing, then the question is, why is it a resource vastly untapped, sometimes from a development standpoint? In my view, the main problem is that we are not taking the right approach. Why still consider remittance as an external source of financing, a source of international reserves, instead of approaching them as one of the components of domestic resource mobilization? And this will shift policy framework towards remarks. However, on average, 1/5 of the remittance to African countries are generated within the continent. 1/5. In some cases, the percentage is much higher. For example, over 50% of the remittance to Benin come from neighboring African countries. If you are aiming for the continent's regional integration as the end goal, why don't we start by addressing remittance from one African country to another as a domestic issue? Why not? These questions go beyond relabeling, because approaching remittance from a conceptual standpoint as a domestic source of financing implies acknowledge that the best way of leveraging them is through domestic resource mobilization systems. And the absence of effective domestic resource mobilization systems in Africa is the main reason why we lack control of remittances flows. From this point of view, the main problem with remittances is their limited use as tools with a potential development impact, recognizing already what they are already doing from a rural development standpoint. So remittances have traditionally had an income inequality reducing effect between regions, being a net transfer of flows from a developed country to a developing one. But they do not necessarily have the same inequality reducing effect within the country that receives the flows. And tapping the development potential of remittance entails creating an entire ecosystem conducive to innovation, entrepreneurship. This involves promoting fintech solutions, fostering financial innovation, and diversifying the range of remittance-related products and services. I'm talking about health insurance premiums, scholarship, other investment opportunities, incentivize savings, promote capital accumulation, and contribute to long-term development. This is the key change in focus that is needed. And this is the new approach requires domestic resource mobilization system. Of course, the cost of transfer is still an issue, and I'm sure that it will be vastly discussed in this forum. But it is not an insurmountable challenge. Mobile money transfers have proven to reduce the cost of remittance by half in many instances. In fact, African remittance markets have already pioneered innovative digital solutions that are leading to safer, cheaper, and faster remittance, at the same time are promoting financial inclusion for migrants and their families, as the president of IFAD, my dear colleague Alvar mentioned here. The main risk here is the digital divide, and I know that you are going to discuss this issue. But the risk can be mitigated. It can be addressed through effective institutions and country systems. Effective policy and regulatory frameworks are needed in Africa. We survived the past 6 years without strong country systems, without weak regulatory frameworks, without, allow me, cop and paste and cop policy frameworks. We survive. We are not going to survive the next 60 years. The rules of the game, the movement of the geopolitical tectonic plates is telling us we need to pay attention to the change of the rules of the game from a geopolitical standpoint. So strong country systems are needed to mobilize remittances as a source of development investments to create innovative ecosystems, need to promote income distribution and avoid the economic growth model that Africa adopted from 2000 to 2015. From 2000 to 2015, we delivered Africa as a continent high economic growth rates, average 6%, but we did not deliver resilience. We grow, but we did not deliver resilience. This is the reason that we are so vulnerable to external shocks. So it is high time that we stop considering remittance as an external source of financing for development beyond our control and start approaching it as a domestic source that can be tapped, mobilized through effective domestic resource mobilization systems. The only way to increase policy space from a African government standpoint. Thank you, and I wish you 3 working, fruitful days. Thank you.
So really amazing remarks there and recommendations for us to reflect on for the next 3 days. So thank you very much, Ms. Doherty, for your wonderful insights. I now have the honor and the pleasure I would like first to thank the government of Kenya for their support, their leadership in hosting this summit. And it's an honor for me now to invite to the podium to share with us a few remarks, Ms. Rosalind Njogu, Principal Secretary, State Department for Diaspora Affairs. Welcome to the podium, please.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Excellencies, distinguished delegates from the government of Kenya, distinguished delegates from international organizations and our friends, my distinguished panelists, governors of central banks, including our very own Daktari, private sector entities, civil society, community leaders, friends, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And welcome to Kenya, a land of immense opportunities, vibrant culture, and remarkable progress. Karibuni tena. As we gather here for a common purpose to explore the realm of global remittances, it is a great pleasure and honor for us as the government of Kenya to host this esteemed global forum on remittances, investment, and development here in our land this year. Kenya remains cognizant of the impact remittances represent for individuals, communities, families, and economies around the world. In 2022, migrant workers abroad sent over $647 billion in remittances to their families back home in low and middle income countries. Africa in turn received over $100 billion of remittances last year. Kenya is known for its innovation and revolution, or innovative revolutions, and we are the 3rd largest recipient of remittances in sub-Saharan Africa in absolute terms, following only Nigeria and Ghana. And for us here in Kenya, remittances have increased tenfold in the last 15 years, reaching an all-time high or record of over $4 billion in 2022, which accounts for nearly 3.4% of our GDP. And remittances are also our highest foreign exchange earner, now surpassing tea, coffee, tourism, horticulture, all of our traditional forex earners. At 6.2% of the send amount, the average cost of sending remittances to Kenya is still above the SDG target of 3%, but lower than the average cost for sub-Saharan Africa, which I think is 6.7%, according to the World Bank's report of 2022 and other intra-African corridors. So as we stand at the crossroads of opportunity, where technology, entrepreneurship, and social development converge to transform lives, Africa still remains the most expensive region in the world to send remittances to, with an average price point that I mentioned earlier. So ours really is to affirm our commitment as Kenya to promote a well-governed, inclusive, and profitable migration as espoused by our adoption of the UN Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration in 2018. And since 2009, Kenya has been a notable contributor with valuable insights to deliberations that paved way for the adoption of the United Nations International Day of Family Remittances in 2018, that recognizes a crucial role remittances play in poverty reduction, in socioeconomic development, and in our conversation on accelerating SDGs. In 2014, the government of Kenya launched the National Diaspora Policy, which has defined our engagement with our diaspora, which of course includes migrant workers, over the last decade, in which major milestones have been realized. Some of those include diaspora participation in the electoral process that we have continued to see and we continue to expand in every election cycle, the formation of diaspora associations, the formation of diaspora circles, which has led to a remarkable increase in diaspora remittances. Issuing out of that diaspora policy, now the State Department for Diaspora Affairs was formed in 2022 to address the concern Kenya's diaspora community, who form an integral part of Kenya's economy and social fabric, face. So really, the function of the State Department for Diaspora Affairs and the dream issues out of this policy of the 2014 that I mentioned. We recognize the significant contribution made through the skills, the knowledge, and the remittances of our diaspora community. In many ways, we think of the remittances not necessarily as external flows, but as a big part of our economy, as was mentioned earlier. Objective 19 of the Global Compact on Migration focuses on creating conditions for diasporas to fully contribute to sustainable development in all countries. In this respect, the government of Kenya continues to demonstrate its unwavering promise, excuse me, and therefore intends to engage the Kenyan diaspora in an increasingly constructive and productive manner to unlock and unleash their full potential. Objective 20 of the Global Compact promotes and supports both the International Day of Family Remittances and this global forum as important platforms to build and strengthen partnerships for innovative solutions on cheaper, faster, safer transfer of remittances with all the relevant stakeholders. Kenya continues to shape the global discourse and immensely contributes to the remittances ecosystem worldwide through various innovations, especially in our fintech industry and digital mechanisms like M-Pesa and other mobile payment platforms. By 2010, M-Pesa had become not only the first, but the largest mobile money network in the world, and it solved and continues to solve some of the biggest challenges in the remittance space, such as mobility, security, ubiquity, and cost. Our transformative platforms have revolutionized the way remittances are sent, received, utilized, and are transforming the lives of millions in Kenya and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe this forum is a space not only for the valuable discussions and one-to-one conversations among the participants on remittances, but also a space for us to strengthen our commitments to work together to devise solutions to the problems facing diaspora communities and migrant workers around the world. Let us reopen conversations about more equal and more open borders. As I conclude, I wish to affirm Kenya's commitment towards working with our diaspora and our friends within international and multilateral spaces to ensure that we reach our own sustainable development goals within the government of Kenya's bottom-up economic transformation agenda, which we call BETTER. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, I extend a warm welcome to all of you and look forward to an engaging and fruitful Global Remittances Forum here in Kenya. And while you're here, if you're away from home, do not forget to sample our wonderful beaches, go on a wonderful safari, sample our world-class hospitality, and meet the people of Kenya. Thank you very much.
So, distinguished guests, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please another big round of applause for our panelists here. Thank you so much for setting the stage and setting the scene for investment. We heard a lot about development. We heard about the central role of remittances and beyond, and the power of finance and how it can transform us. Ladies and gentlemen, this comes to the end of the opening remarks and opening ceremony, so I'd like to invite our distinguished guests to leave the podium, and I'd like to invite Mr. Pedro to the floor to take us through our next segment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Pedro de Vasconcelos. I'm the manager of the financing facility for remittances at IFAD, the unit in charge of this thematic. It is really a pleasure to now announce the second part of this opening of the Global Forum 2023, Rescuing the SDGs by 2030. And I think this will echo with some of the words that were mentioned before as we address the SDGs. In half the way, that means half full, half empty. We have 7 years ahead of us. So the next panel will try to dig a little bit more into this part on how to empower really 1 billion remittance family members with remittances. And for this, I would like to invite my guests to come to the stage. And as you do, I will kindly introduce them. We're going to have the United Nations Migration Network, Ugochi Daniels, Network Coordinator and Deputy Director General for the operation of the International Organization for Migration, well known as IOM. For the European Union, we have Excellency Mr. Henriette Geiger, Ambassador of the European Union to Kenya. Representative, please come in and let me just see. We're for the G20 and the GPFI presidency of 2023. We'll have Gopina Pralada Chartulas. And finally, we will have the Central Bank of Kenya, Dr. Patrick Goroje, Governor, for this panel. I will invite, I think, maybe, I don't interrupt anyone so everybody can see. Sorry about that. For this session, we will invite you to deliver your remarks on the podium. Of course, you're more than welcome to do it from your chair, so it's for you to decide. But as per our agenda, I will call now Ugochi Daniels to the podium to deliver remarks.
Good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here. Dear Excellencies, esteemed participants, dear colleagues, it's my pleasure to join you today on behalf of the United Nations Network on Migration. This week's Global Forum on Remittances, Investment and Development comes at an important time, as we all know, and as we look forward to the SDG Summit in New York in September. And indeed, there are a few challenges, critical challenges ahead. Only 12% of the SDG targets are on track. Progress on and further 50% is weak and insufficient. And we've stalled or gone into reverse on more than 30% of the SDGs. So I'm not too sure about half empty, half full. I think we're tending towards empty. So it's really important that we are able, well, the discussion that we're having over the next 3 days, but to really reflect on how we can engage the 1 billion remittance family members around the world and support their agency to achieve the positive impact on migration and remittances for sustainable development. Key to our discussions today is the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, the GCM, which is rooted in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and recognizes international cooperation on migration as a prerequisite for positive development outcomes in all countries, and affirms fully the principle to leave no one behind. Now, through the framework of the GCM, migration is an accelerator of inclusive growth and sustainable development, enriching societies through human socioeconomic and cultural capacities. Migrants are key contributors to sustainable development, and it goes without saying that they are often acting as agents of change and driving innovation. But I'm pretty sure nothing I've said is new. You all know that. That's why we're all in this room together. But maybe what you didn't know, but I know because my colleagues worked really hard to prepare me for the remarks I'm giving to you this morning, is that indeed an average migrant sends about 15% of their earned income home, and that most recipients are women, and 3/4 of remittances are used for family needs, and women tend to invest more in healthcare, nutritious food, and education, contributing to human capital development. And what we have also seen in cases is that family savings has gone up. Women are good at saving. The proportion of remittances that isn't spent on immediate needs are also often invested in new businesses or climate-resilient agricultural infrastructure, leading to economic development. All of these are sustainable development goals in their own right, which remittances are core to achieving. And the previous speaker very eloquently presented the numbers in terms of global remittance flows to the continent where we are now. And she also highlighted that the continent has some of the most expensive remittance corridors in the world, and that it is higher than the global average and more than twice the target, the SDG target. But what we've seen is that digital platforms are bringing down costs of remittance transfers, and that right now, transfers are 2% less after the pandemic. And that's why the remarks made earlier about the importance of bridging the digital divide are critical, because that is how we are going to be, well, the remittance recipients are going to really be able to harness the power of remittances. Now, remittances also act as a catalyst for economic growth by contributing to financial inclusion. It stimulates local consumption, fosters entrepreneurship and investment. Moreover, they play a critical role in community development projects. There are many global examples of diaspora bonds for infrastructure initiatives, and several examples even here in the continent. But it's important to note that success of diaspora bond varies, so there's a lot to learn. But more can be done to empower migrants and families such that remittances and economic contributions support achievement of the SDGs. And the United Nations Network on Migration can show the way. So for instance, IFAD's Prime Africa program works with private sector partners in 7 priority countries, including Kenya, to develop innovative digital remittance products and linkages to financial inclusion. UNDP works with countries such as Lebanon to understand the source and use of remittances by recipient households. And in Belgium, IOM's O-Remit project works with the central bank and diaspora groups to analyze remittance sending behaviors, raise awareness for cheaper remittance channels, and engage with diasporas looking to become investors in their countries of origin. These are all important themes that can be discussed this week. Migrants and diaspora are more than just their economic contributions. So what needs to be done to create an enabling environment? First, establishing knowledge exchange platforms, fostering collaboration, and encouraging mentorship initiatives between diaspora professionals and local institutions, we can harness the expertise of the diaspora community. Diaspora networks and associations provide valuable platforms for sharing skills, expertise, and resources, supporting development projects and entrepreneurial endeavors. 2, promoting cultural and social ties and fostering a sense of belonging among the diaspora are equally important. By addressing these gaps, we can create an enabling environment that facilitates diaspora engagement and maximizes the impact of remittances. Third, policy coherence is essential, ensuring alignment between diaspora policies, migration policies, and national development strategies. It's very encouraging to note that many countries are now creating ministries of diaspora, are putting in place diaspora policies. And of course, apart from the importance of policy coherence, this needs to translate into instruments at the community level so that the 1 billion remittance recipients can invest in development in their communities where they're invested. And lastly, collaboration amongst governments, diaspora communities, civil society organizations, and the private sector is crucial to leverage resources and expertise effectively. Initiatives such as the Global Diaspora Policy Alliance, which involves all of the actors I just mentioned, as well as the UN and migrants and diaspora themselves, aims to facilitate this crucial connection of migration and sustainable development through partnerships. So this is the stage where I'm supposed to say, thank you very much for your attention. I wish you very good deliberations for the next, or all of us, for the next 3 days. But what I would really want to appeal to all of us is to seize this opportunity to create a favorable environment that empowers the diaspora, channels remittances towards sustainable community development projects, and paves the way for a prosperous future for the 1 billion remittance senders and recipients around the world. That is a really, really high and important mandate that we all have and that I want to leave you all with. And just to reiterate that you can always count on the UN network on migration for this support and providing the space for our continued partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Daniels, for these remarks and that conclusion. With this, I would like now to invite Her Excellency Henriette Geiger, Ambassador of the European Union to Kenya, for the remarks. Please.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good morning. On behalf of the European Union, a warm welcome to the Global Forum on Remittances, Investment and Development. Remittances transcend borders, so our conversations, partnerships and innovations ought to do the same. That is why this Global Forum is critical to advance our collective effort towards more affordable, effective and transparent remittances. We have heard that remittances are a lifeline for millions of people around the world, and over the last years, we have witnessed their importance firsthand here in Kenya. As mentioned before, Kenya is the third largest recipient of remittances in sub-Saharan Africa, and we welcome very much Kenya's decision to establish a vice ministry on diaspora. As we heard, this is a very welcome and very good step to acknowledge the increasing importance of diaspora for the development of a country. Remittances kept Kenyan families afloat during the pandemic and the cost of living crisis. They have also been a stabilizing factor for the Kenyan economy at large, as one of the most resilient sources of foreign exchange. A challenge we face globally is that a very large, the highest percentage of the remittances goes to consumption instead of investment. And globally, we have been struggling to unleash the power of remittances for investment. Those who will succeed will be the winners. Yet, in many countries around the world, remittances have this enormous potential to play a fundamental role in the development of the countries. And with this in mind, the EU and IFAD launched 2 new initiatives in Kenya with Credit Bank and FSD Kenya to make digital remittance flows faster, safer, and above all, cheaper. Both are excellent examples of leveraging partnerships between SACCOs, fintechs, and banks to improve financial inclusion and make remittances more affordable to reach our SDG commitments. Of course, Kenya is just one example, albeit a very good one. The EU's efforts on remittances transcend well beyond. To speak to the broader agenda, I would like to introduce the European Union's Commissioner for International Partnerships, Ms. Jutta Urpilainen, who has championed the global remittance agenda for the EU over the last years. She has an important video message to mark the start of this forum. I invite you to listen to her very brief remarks and wish you fruitful exchanges over the next 3 days. Thank you. Asanteni sana.
Distinguished guests, remittances are a key engine for social and economic development. We all endorse this view. The European Commission was the first financial supporter of IFAD finance facility on remittances. Since then, we have partnered up to address the multiple challenges migrants face when sending remittances back to their home countries. The EU is the main remittances sender to Africa and the second largest remittances sender to the developing countries worldwide. Remittances from the EU have a truly global outreach, 100 promoting cheaper, faster, and more secure remittances. And we have made progress. Our joint efforts have led to 20% reduction in remittances costs when sending from Europe to developing countries. The Prime Africa initiative with IFAD is benefiting over 1 million people. And we are intensifying cooperation on Central Asia as well. Dear friends, reducing costs of remittances is an objective closely connected to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. In July, we will present the first ever EU voluntary review on the SDGs at the UN High-Level Political Forum. We need to cultivate international partnership and bring remittances at the core of the development debate while underlining their link to the climate change challenge. We need to team up to encourage more productive use of remittances. The European Commission considers the Global Forum on Remittances, Investment and Development a central venue for advancing the overall remittances action agenda. This is the beginning of a debate to bring remittances potential up to date.
And I would like to thank the European Commission for these remarks. Sorry for the technology clip. Well, tells us one thing is that we cannot rely on technology so much. So this is a good message of hope for humankind, for all following the artificial intelligence doomsday. So without further ado, right now, after the European Commission, it would be my honor to invite the presidency 2023 of the G20, India, to take the floor. Before you take the floor, I just want to say, I think we all know the importance that remittances are for India as the largest now country. So it is extremely interesting for us to see how a country like India has receiving remittances and being part of the main sending countries addresses this issue. Mr. Kabila, you have the floor.
Good morning to all of you. And thank you so much indeed for the invitation to G20 presidency and GPFI, which is co-chaired by the Reserve Bank of India, which I represent here. Actually, I'm wearing two hats today. One is the G20 presidency hat, and the other one is India being the largest remittance market in the world. And these two hats are very heavy indeed. It is invisible to you. In fact, I can feel it. So as the occasion demands, what I will do is, I will present certain broad milestones of G20 engagement on remittances. Then I will go over to the Indian case study in a very, very brief manner and try to see any broad takeaways can be taken, for the benefit of global audience. Coming to G20, in 2011, G20 adopted what we call 5x5 goal, whereby the aim was to reduce global average cost of remittances by 5% in 5 years. In 2014, G20 adopted the instrumentality of national remittance plans to further the cause of remittances. These national remittance plans will be reviewed annually and updated once in 2 years. In 2016, the G20 goals on remittances were aligned with those of SDG. In 2021, the pandemic year, Italian presidency brought out an excellent report showcasing certain case studies which ensured that these remittances are not adversely affected and these monies reach the recipients. Coming to this 2023 presidency, the focus is on promoting financial innovation, innovative payment systems. That is the broad aim of G20 under Indian presidency. In this year, GFRID will bring out a report now showcasing certain case studies on innovative digital payments, remittances. And the Reserve Bank of India, in collaboration with BIS, Bank for International Settlement, has launched what we call Tech Sprint Hackathon, the 4th edition, focusing on cross-border payments. It's a global competition. It is open to all. It will end in Q3 2023, this year, September this year. So I take this platform, I take this opportunity to urge everyone to participate in this competition and make this a success. And in 2 days from now, I think on June 16th, we all will be celebrating International Day of Family Remittances. To commemorate this day, G20 countries of GFRID will issue a statement acknowledging the contribution these remittances make to the lives of millions of households across the world. At the same time, reiterating our commitment to bring the cost of remittances to the SDG goals of 3% and eliminating the corridors with costs of remittance higher than 5%. Now let me come to the Indian case study. If you see the size of Indian remittance market, it is more than $100 billion. To put it in perspective, the total amount of remittances that African countries get together, if you put those remittances together, our Indian remittances are much more than that. And the micro level impact of these remittances to the families of recipients is well documented. But what I want to highlight is the macroeconomic implication of these remittances. In terms of the size, this is around 3% of Indian GDP. Suppose if Indian GDP is around $3.5 trillion, this is around 100 billion. In the absence of these remittances, my current account deficit on the balance of payments would have been significantly higher. That would have complicated my macroeconomic choices, policy choices. So at the micro level, families of recipients are indeed benefited because their consumption patterns are different from what it could have been otherwise. And the macroeconomic implications in terms of enabling better macroeconomic policy choices is to be recognized. What has made India the biggest remittance market? If you see some of characteristics, features of our market, we have got vibrant physical and digital public infrastructure. Almost all Indians have bank accounts. And we have got what is called Unified Payment Interface, UPI, as it is famously called. And I don't need to introduce UPI to the audience, just to flag it. It is a mobile-based fast payment system enabling remittances instantaneously 24/7. And India is among the very few countries where CBDC trials are in advanced stage, both retail, wholesale, and cross-border. Then we have got vibrant institutions. Over a period of time, vibrant institutions have evolved. Just to give a flavor, just to give an illustration, we have got National Payment Corporation of India, NPCI, which has given UPI to the world. And we have got vibrant cross-border institutional arrangements. Just to give you an idea, we have got what is called rupee drawing arrangement. Rupee drawing arrangement. Under this arrangement, what happens is some leading money transfer companies abroad can open Wastro accounts with Indian banks. Wastro accounts with Indian banks, and money can come from abroad to these Wastro accounts in India. And these receipts in the Wastro account will be credited to the accounts of the intended recipients. So we are leveraging the network of Wastro account. Then second one is we are going beyond banks, whereby foreign money remittance companies can have tie-up with banks, non-banks, and even post offices. So here, in this new arrangement, family remittances of small ticket, $2,500, are allowed in this new arrangement. Then, if you see the literature on remittances, basically the emphasis is more on the demand side, supply side. In the sense, put in place infrastructure, technology, reduce cost of remittances. But there is an underappreciation of demand constraints on remittances. For instance, the recipient may not have the ID required to utilize this supply side infrastructure. The recipient may not be aware of the digital literacy. He may be digitally illiterate. So in the Reserve Bank of India, especially in this year, what we are trying to do is to address the demand side constraints, educating people. We have got weekly awareness schemes where we collaborate with celebrities. So this is a holistic package of policies and initiatives which has enabled India to be the largest remittance market in the world. Now, what are the broad lessons that we can draw from this? One is build vibrant institutions, vibrant and resilient institutions. That is a must. Then develop public digital infrastructure in collaboration with stakeholders. Then regulation. This is another takeaway from Indian case study. Indian regulation is trying to hold a balance between promoting innovation at the same time preserving financial stability. So the regulators need to be aware of the need for holding this balance, at the same time focus on market integrity and customer protection. Then bring down the cost of remittances by leveraging technology and institutional reforms. And emphasize on demand side constraints, build awareness among the people. So this is what I thought I will share with you. Thank you so much.
I'd like to thank India for these remarks, and I think this sets the stage now also for our last speaker of this panel, and of course, Mr. Patrick Njoroge, Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya. It is an honor to have you here and to close these two opening sessions. So please, if you allow me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And IFAD President, U.S. Special Advisor, the Special Advisor, UN Special Advisor for Africa, and also other United Nations officials. Harriet, recognize you. Thank you very much for all the work that we've been doing together. Our very own PS, Christine, great to see you here, really. And everyone else, excellencies, distinguished guests. It's an honor for me to join you at this summit of the Global Forum on Remittances, Investment and Development. This event aims to strengthen the existing initiatives aimed at advancing the international agenda on remittances and diaspora investment. I am pleased to note that during the summit, delegates will explore the new opportunities and challenges in the global and Africa's ecosystems, new digital means and innovative business models, as well as sharing experiences. Remittances are inexorably tied to the stories of migrants. Stories full of courage, endurance, desperation, successes, failures, guilt, redemption, the best and the worst of life. Consider the desperation and courage of those migrants putting all their lot in a hardly seaworthy boat in the Mediterranean Sea, and a promise from a human trafficker. Consider the story of an Afghanistani boy in the book Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini, or the story of Sadio Mane, the celebrated Senegalese professional footballer who left home with nothing, but now supports not just a village, but everyone in his region in Senegal. These are the stories of migrants that should be told. But I'll now turn to the theme of the summit by acknowledging the important role of the diaspora in economic development, mainly through remittances. I can only associate myself with the comments of all the speakers, wonderful insights, all those that spoke before me. The financial contribution of diaspora remittances is significant. As the IFAD president mentioned just now, and indeed the president of the African Development Bank remarked recently, and I quote, Africans in diaspora are Africa's largest financiers. Remittances from the diaspora to Africa grew from US dollars 37 billion in 2010 to US dollars 96 billion in 2021. Total official development assistance to Africa in 2021 was US dollars 35 billion, or 36%, just a mere 1/3 of remittances from diaspora, end quote. According to data from the World Bank, remittances flows to low and medium income countries increased by 4.9% to reach US dollars 626 billion in 2022. Even as global flows are estimated to have reached US dollars 794 billion in the same year. Further, remittances now represent a prime source of external finance for low and medium income countries relative to other types of flows, such as foreign direct investment, official development assistance, and portfolio investment flows. I particularly was keen in your comments, Madam Special Advisor, on your experience when you were finance minister in this regard. I don't know where most of our countries would have been if it were not for the diaspora flows during the COVID and post-COVID period. I really don't know. Closer home, Kenya, as the PS mentioned to us, is the third largest recipient of remittances in sub-Saharan Africa, and it received US dollars 4 billion in 2022, an increase of 8.3% compared to 2021, which represents over 3% of Kenya's GDP. Interestingly, as we were coming into COVID, the World Bank predicted that diaspora flows will fall by 10%. Actually, it shot up by 20%, then 10%. In subsequent years, and the last year, as we mentioned just now, 8.3%. It's amazing how resilient the diaspora flows have been. So remittances have had massive impact on the lives and livelihoods of the recipients. Take, for example, Esther from Kenya, who worked in Saudi Arabia as a housekeeper for 7 years from 2012 to 2019. She was able to achieve 70% of her financial goals while in Saudi Arabia, and at the same time managed to build a 2-bedroom stone house in Kabete, Kenya, educate her 3 children, and take care of her mother as well as other relative needs. Kenya's digital landscape enabled her to achieve this by providing a platform for transactions, M-Pesa, and for savings, M-Shwari. Esther is a returned migrant. She's now back home and believes that she would have achieved 100% of her financial goals had she stayed longer. However, as was mentioned by speakers before me, the cost of sending remittances remains high, especially in certain corridors. According to the World Bank's data, the cost of sending US dollars 200, that's the benchmark, averaged between 5% and 10% worldwide. Just think of that, 10%. 10% for a financial transaction, far exceeding the SDG goal of 3%. As a result of the high costs, remittance tickets remain sizable. In the case of Kenya, the adoption of technology and innovation has reduced costs, allowing for smaller, bite-sized remittance tickets. Kenya's 2012 Diaspora Remittance Survey revealed that 32% of remittances are through mobile money operators due to their convenience, speed, and lower cost. Still, a lot needs to be done to reduce costs towards the SDG target. Remittances are used by recipients largely for daily expenditures and not for investments and growth. The 2021 Diaspora Remittance Survey that we conducted revealed that the purchase of food and household goods, medical and education expenses, rent, and household utilities constituted 49% of remittances. 49%. This indicates that the huge reservoir of human and financial capital that represents the diaspora remains largely untapped. To me, that is critical. The diaspora should be an important bridge between the host and the home countries. For instance, India's success story in the IT industry is anchored on the diaspora. India is home to an increasing number of startups that have achieved unicorn status, that is, enterprises valued at more than $1 billion, and that have been founded by Indian diaspora. So we should stop looking at our diaspora as an ATM, so you go there, get your money, and go spend it. Yeah? Or like that child who comes to you and says, Daddy, Mommy, I need some money. It shouldn't be that. We should be on a journey with them. And I presume this will be one of the points that will be brought out or fleshed out in the rest of the conference. So the benefits of the diaspora should go well beyond the remittances. This is an appropriate time for deepening the conversation on how the diaspora can contribute to economic growth and progress, especially in Africa, where significant opportunities exist and significant resources will be required to put our citizens on the path of shared prosperity. A UNDP report it's actually a 2016 or 2018 report, indicated that by 2050, more than half of Africa's population will be under 25. So, under 25. Additionally, 25% of the world's labor force will be based in Africa. Just think of that. And between 10 and 12 million people join the labor force each year in Africa. However, the continent creates only 3.7 million jobs annually. Look at that huge deficit. 12 million and we're only creating 4 million. So this quandary can only be resolved with significant input from all those who have a connection with the continent, and crucially, the diaspora. Nevertheless, further work is needed to improve the business environment and thereby attract additional investment. Kenya has implemented several measures to improve the business climate, including significant investment in infrastructure, advancing innovative use of technology, among others. These initiatives are key to promoting competitiveness in the economy. A recent survey by the US News and World Report ranked Kenya at position 26 globally, an improvement from position 39 in 2021, due to its resilience and momentum. It was also ranked the best country to start and run a successful business across the continent in 2022. Here I would want to have a shout out for our PS, Roslyn Jogu, who actually has really been working significantly in first understanding the diaspora needs, and secondly, bringing information to the diaspora about what Kenya needs to do or what Kenya provides them, and also telling us, policymakers, what we need to do in order to attract the diaspora, their investments, etc. So thank you very much for the work you've done over the last 6 months. As I draw to a close, let me mention a new innovation that will expand the available investment opportunities for the diaspora. PS, you know what I'm going to talk about. This follows the digital innovations that allow transactions to be conducted anytime, anywhere, and with small ticket sizes. So the Central Bank of Kenya is implementing a Central Securities Depository, CSD, that will improve efficiency and transparency in the government domestic debt market. I want to say that this is the gold standard in terms of Central Securities Depository. So this CSD will mitigate segmentation in the interbank market and enhance liquidity distribution by strengthening the operation of a secured overnight market. So that's good news for me, the central banker, and also for the commercial bankers. But more importantly, the CSD provides a new and easy way to invest in government securities and will therefore be beneficial to the diaspora. They don't need to come back to Kenya to make investments in the T-bills, T-bonds, etc. So the Kenyans abroad will register on CSD accounts online from wherever they are, thereby mitigating the current inconvenience of having to come physically to the central bank. Importantly, they'll also be able to invest in Government of Kenya securities online, on their phone. Additional investment channels in government securities, including diaspora bonds, are also being considered. This is in a matter of less than a month. This will be launched. My commitment, PS. As I conclude, a poignant text comes to mind from the little book, Sea Prayer, by none other than Khaled Hosseini, the same author of Kite Runner that I mentioned at the beginning. A father prays over his sleeping son as they wait for dawn and a boat to arrive, starting their perilous journey towards the promise of a new life. I quote, pray God steers the vessel through, where the shores slip out of earshot and we are a fly speck. In the heaving waters, pitching and tilting, easily swallowed. Because you are the precious cargo, Marvin, the most precious there ever was. I pray the sea knows this, inshallah. This summit offers an opportunity to chart a new path for engaging the diaspora. I pray the sea knows this. I wish you fruitful deliberation and a successful summit. Thank you very much for your attention.
Mr. Governor, thank you so much for these words. I retain a lot, but there's one thing that really I would like to reiterate that you mentioned is what happened 2 years ago. This forum had to be conducted and hosted in 2020. It wasn't because of the pandemic. And you did mention that the close call, the realization of what these flows meant for so many. At that moment, it was a close call because migrants find a way, again, to send money back home a few months later, and it was not what we expected. But I would like is really to reiterate this, to always have that in mind of not taking for granted of what 1 billion people are doing as we did. I did a small calculus of how much money will be sent to their loved ones during these three days, and I will say that in my concluding remarks, but it's a big number. So thank you for those words. I would like to close this panel, and if it's okay, I would like to also invite Mr. Lario Duarte and the government of Kenya also to join here just for a photo opportunity before we move into the next panel. And now I will invite the moderator for the next session, who will introduce the panelists, me included. So, Liwa, I'll give you the floor.
Included. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, welcome to the first plenary panel session of the Global Forum on Remittances, Investment and Development. My name is Liwadin Flis from the Office of Special Advisor on Africa. I have the pleasure to moderate this panel session. After the amazing statements that we heard and then all the insights, I think we are so excited to have this session. So the theme of this session will be on harnessing the power of migrants, and then we'll be focusing on addressing some of the misconceptions and trying to highlight some of the opportunities that arise in this context. We'll be hearing about the importance of remittances, but also it should be recalled that in the recent times, these economic contributions of migrants have become increasingly crucial as they send remittances to support their families and communities back home. So the prime example, as it was mentioned this morning, is during the COVID-19 pandemic. In Africa, remittances are also vital components of national economies. They act as a lifeline for families and are especially significant in rural areas. In Africa, migrants sent over 100 billion in remittances last year. But also looking ahead, it is estimated that by 2030, migrants all over the world will have sent over 5 trillion in remittances to families in low and middle income countries. This is a lot of money. So how can these flows be maximized for the benefits of the families, but also for the economy at large? So migrants actually possess the critical potential to contribute to their economies, both for the host countries, but also for the countries of origin. But we should have in mind that there are some misconceptions and also some missed opportunities that often hinder the effective utilizations of this power. So to fully harness the potential of migrants and address the misconceptions, we have gathered for you a distinguished panel of experts representing key stakeholders. Allow me to introduce our esteemed panel members. First, we have Almaz Negash, CEO and founder of the Africa Diaspora Network. Almaz has been recognized as one of the diaspora of the 100 outstanding Silicon Valley women of influence for her work in social innovation. She has dedicated her efforts to informing and engaging Africans in the diaspora, facilitating collaboration with social entrepreneurs and business leaders to improve lives both on the continent and in the diaspora communities. Ms. Almaz, we are very happy to have you on this panel. Joining us next, we have Pedro de Vasconcelos. I think he already introduced himself, but I'm going to introduce you again. So he's the lead technical specialist and manager for the financing facility for remittances as IFAD. So he is internationally recognized expert in migration and economic development. He actively contributes to global policy agendas, placing remittances and financial inclusion at the forefront of major development institutions and government. And then he is the one behind us being here. So thank you, Pedro. We are also honored to have Mr. Dilip Prata, lead economist of migration and remittances at the World Bank. He heads the Global Knowledge Partnership on Migration and Development, in short, NOMAD. I think for those who are in the research area in remittances, NOMAD is very known. They have the data, all the data that we've been mentioning today, so it's coming from there. So Dilip is a thought leader in migration and remittances with extensive experience in innovation financing for development. He has been instrumental in establishing NOMAD and has inspired many startups through his TED Talk on migration and remittances, which have over 1.45 million views. So if you didn't see it, watch it, please. Watch it, it's very interesting. Last but not least, we have Dare Okuju. He's the founder and CEO of MFS Africa, a leading Pan-African fintech company. So his company operates the largest digital payment hub on the continent, connecting over 180 million mobile wallets. Through his work, he enables merchants, banks, mobile operators, and money transfer companies to leverage the ubiquity of mobile wallet for safe, convenient, and cost-effective transactions. So all the benefits that we've been talking about since this morning. In 2017, MFS Africa was named one of Africa's top 10 most innovative companies by the international business magazine Fast Company. Now it's time to delve into our panel discussion, which, as I said earlier, is aiming to uncover the misconceptions surrounding migration, contributions, identify the untapped opportunities. So our esteemed panel members will help us discussing these issues, and they will share with us some of the insights, experiences, and hopefully we try to get some recommendations also. I will be asking a question to each panel member, and they will have a maximum of 4 to 5 minutes to address it, and maybe also I will come back with some follow-up questions. So let me start on my left, Pedro. I'll start with you. So drawing from your extensive experience in maximizing the impact of remittances and migrant investments. So can you talk about these misconceptions, especially those related to the nature of remittances, their purpose, and also the mechanisms that are used for sending remittances, but also for diaspora investments. So let's clear out all the misconceptions first before we go into detail. Thank you.
Thank you. All misconceptions, and I'm not sure. Some, yes, and I think there's a classification, and I'll give you my best 3 or 4 over the years, and my apologies for my colleagues already if I'm gonna steal already some of those. I'll try to get the most juicy ones out of the way, but I think as you heard it today in this morning presentations, some is, as you say very well, the nature of migrant contributions. These are private flows. We need to understand that. It is people sending to their loved ones, normally family members, back home for a specific purpose. So these are private flows. These are not aid in the sense that governments see it. So this is the first, because still too often we hear, wouldn't it be great to take that amount of funds and put it somewhere else? These are private flows. The second point is what these flows do in terms of nature. I think the biggest misconception that I've been here for 20 years on this, and I think many will back me up, is these flows are for consumption. And I think everybody in this room, when they hear the word consumption in economic terms, they think about things that are not really useless. Maybe a color TV that is too big, a party that went too hard, maybe a bit too much. This is not the reality of the 1 billion people and their families. Family members that receive remittances know very well what they need. Yet, it's true. Sometimes we need some shoes. Sometimes we like, everybody in this room has a nice color TV, I'm pretty sure. So yes, we do have that type of expense from time to time. But for the majority, as you heard it very well this morning, it is the SDGs. Starting with poverty, you have family fracture. It is one migrant leaving the family behind. This is no fun. That's the reality for the remittance families. And they do that in many cases to address the poverty that they feel like they're feeling at family level. SDG 1, they put food on the table, education, medicine, etc., everything that you heard. So I think this is one that needs to be cleared out once and for all on the nature. One last, well, the third that I would say is not differentiating remittances and diaspora investment. I think this is an important one. It might be the same person that do it, but remittances are small amounts sent for the family, as I just mentioned, for the SDGs, not to invest in a development program. If they have a savings out of that, and we heard it, migrants do invest, recipients also invest, recipient of remittances also save some money. If there's some left over to be either saved or invested is a very good thing. But let's not forget that these are the purpose of remittances. On the other hand, as I think we're going to hear, diaspora investment are the savings of the diaspora abroad that have a connection with their home communities of origin and would like to invest. And it's very important, I think, to distinguish this. I think at the forum we did that. Tomorrow we're going to have 2 tracks to look into that, into those aspects, because it's very important, particularly if we want to maximize, I think these were the words that you use, if we want to maximize these flows, support remittance families or diaspora investments in investing better, more, well, we need to get our message right operationally. I think this is mainly the key messages that I think would allow us to go into the right track in terms of what misconceptions are, and I think we'll have the time to talk on opportunities, but I'll leave it here.
Thank you very much, Pedro, very clear. I think we'll come back to the issue of the misconception later on, and then also on the opportunities, missed opportunities. But let me invite Ms. Almas. We've been talking about the diaspora, and then the contribution that the diaspora is bringing to the economies. And you, as an influential figure in fostering the involvement of the African diaspora and acknowledging also the diversity of the diaspora, because people think that African diaspora is homogeneous, but the reality it's not. So can you tell us more about the African diaspora, and then what are the strategies that you recommend for countries to harness the power of diaspora, while also trying to dispel all the misconceptions around their potential? And also, if you have any other examples around this, I think that will be beneficial for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. I am so delighted to be here. Let me just thank the organizers. Pedro, thank you for bringing us together. I know how hard it is to put something like this, but I have never worked with people as your team. So I want you to be proud of what you've done. I think it's incredible, and please, please applaud them, because I think sometimes we underestimate how we got to be where we are, and I'm so proud of what you've done, and I'm very delighted to be with this incredible group of people. I think this question is very important, and for us, the African Diaspora Network, we're based in Silicon Valley in this incredible ecosystem for innovation, entrepreneurship, and investment. We can't do this without such an ecosystem. So to your question, for the diaspora, what does the diaspora need? I don't even have to answer. I mean, we've heard it. We are the most generous philanthropists in the world. Do you know that the narrative of Africans being philanthropists has never been talked about? Because there is always that notion we don't give. And I'm always advocating for my people simply because I know we do. And that's remittances. Let me also start from how we became to be who we are. I am an Eritrean diaspora, married to another Eritrean diaspora. When we started our life 29 years ago, we were just really figuring out how do we buy a house, when do we have children. As soon as we start to see that we were actually getting somewhere, I became restless. Wait a second, now what do we do? Is it just all about us? What else can we do? You think that you are the only one thinking that way. It's actually many, many, many diasporans do. Because you know who you are, where you came from, what you left behind, and so you have this sense of obligation that's so innate that you don't need someone to remind you. However, to your question, you do need an enabling ecosystem in order to provide, whether it's your knowledge, your money, your talent, somebody has to receive it in a way that is conducive for the communities that you're trying to support to make use of it. So yes, it is not only for consumption, but if you don't have any other way of using the remittances to enable to make a sustainable life for your family, you probably have to use it for something that is probably not as useful. Because it's not about giving money only, it's about also educating the community on how to use the money. And I think our friend from India mentioned something, educating the recipient community so that they know how to use the money. So I think there are some gaps that we need to fulfill, but what I'm happy about this conference is there are so many great success stories being told. There is also this incredible sense of acknowledgement of what has failed and what didn't work. If we recognize what didn't work, then we can begin to start to figure out how to make it work. I think what I get frustrated with is we talk about all the beautiful things without really addressing the bad thing. On our continent, let me say this. I'm very delighted to be in Nairobi. So to the hotel yesterday, I said, I really don't need to go to the stores which I can find them in the US. I just want to go to the markets where I can meet women who are doing this incredible design work that nobody really recognized them as they should. And I did go, and I met this amazing woman who is selling women's clothing in a marketplace. The clothes that she sells would probably have gone for $100 to $200 in the US, but she's selling it for $21 if you translate that money, the local money, to the US dollar. So I think there are these women that get to be supported by remittances, and they're using the remittances to create business for themselves and their family. But there are also the gaps of educating them to even scale up what they do and get what they deserve. So we have some work to do. And I think on the engagement, on the enabling ecosystem, all we are asking, at least I am asking, we are always going to send the remittances. That is not going to stop. Because when your family asks you for something, I know that we will do everything we can do to give and make sure that the money goes. I want to go beyond remittances. I want us to think about not only from where we come from, and then that's the only place where I'm going to invest. No, I should have the opportunity to invest in Kenya, in Ghana, in South Africa, wherever there is an opportunity, just as an investor. And that money, as Pedro mentioned, is not coming from the remittances, it's coming from my saving. I am asking the diaspora to tap into the savings that we have, not all of us, but a lot of us, and use some part of that money to invest in projects, in communities that we want to see scale the work that they do. Otherwise, I fear if we depend only on remittances, we are also creating dependent society. What if the person who is giving the money, sending money to families, dies? Who's going to help that family in that community? They actually have nothing they created. There was no sustainable system in which they could support their family. So if I die, then the family doesn't have anything. That we need to stop. I am not saying stop remittances because I get in trouble all the time. No, keep sending remittances, but also keep digging, and let's look at other ways to invest on the continent so we have a system that is more, the money that is more scalable, because remittances are not scalable because they're transactional, they're one-to-one. We wanted to go beyond. So I would love to have that conversation, but I think this is where the diaspora, at least this is where we are at ADN, and I look forward to learning more and collaborating.
Thank you very much, Almaz. I think the key word that you mentioned at the end of your intervention is scaling up. Scaling up, going beyond remittances. Still, remittances are important to support families, but the contribution of diaspora should support more sustainable and resilient societies. So we have the pleasure to have Dilip with us on the panel. And Dilip, from your experience in the field, and then also from your own perspectives. So Almaz was mentioning that remittances are not only money sent, but there are knowledge, there are technical support issues, there are skills, and so many other things. But there are many stakeholders involved in this. There is a value chain. So how can people or these stakeholders involved in this value chain collaborate together to leverage the power of their resources and then to put this to work for their communities?
Thank you. It's been 20 years that I have been looking into remittances and have been surprised every year at their growth and sustained growth. Even during COVID, they did not fall. And one wonders, is it the migration that is doing it, or there is something else going on? And it seems like if I had a title for my talk or for this forum, I would probably say something like, informally, can't keep them down. I don't see any eventuality where remittances would go down in the next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. I cannot visualize that. So with that out of the way, that important statement, can't keep them down, I would like to just respond to your question, Mr. Chair. Let's say there are 300 million, roughly, international migrants and refugees, another 700, 800 million, 900 million are internal migrants. They all send money. In fact, they migrated so that they can send money. So there is a chicken and egg kind of issue there. Remittances are probably the motivator for migration as well. So with that, no wonder that remittances are large, but then between the diaspora and the country of origin, there are other links, as you pointed out. Remittances are one, but then there is investment, then there is skill transfer, then there is technology transfer, then there is trade, tourism, and then importantly, values and impact on governance back home. We are focused more on the sort of the financial aspects of remittances in this forum today, and I'm so happy to see, Pedro, that IFAD has been leading this in organizing the global forum. So just on the remittances and diaspora investments, 2 points. One, remittances last year reached $647 billion. That's only remittances flowing to low and middle income countries, and that really does not take into account all the informal, unrecorded flows. The true size of remittances is quite likely $1 trillion. And again, after a 10% growth the year before, and prior to that, another 8% growth, meaning the total 20% growth, there is still a growth being projected this year and next year. So remittances are growing, and then there is this whole issue of diaspora investments. People send money home, but they save quite a bit of money, maybe even more, where they are in the destination country. And often that money is parked either as under the pillow, meaning cash, 0% interest rate, and otherwise, those who have bank accounts, and many don't, It is parked in bank deposits. Again, interest rate is zero. So that is where the idea of diaspora bond comes in. And this perennial question of how we can use remittances for productive purposes, I think that question is completely a non-starter. You cannot ask me how I spend my money. Get out of my way. Don't ask me that question, how should I spend money, right? So it is okay to say that the money that I send through the banking system, that leads to financial deepening, financial inclusion, and that money can be mobilized by issuing a diaspora bond. Bond is a financing mechanism, locks the money for 4 years, 5 years for the term, and then you offer an interest rate, and if you invest it for the right reason, a lot of people will invest. That's the idea of the diaspora bond. So with that, that brings us to, here is an idea, a $100 billion financing idea. If you reduce remittance costs from the current 6%, or in Africa more than 8%, within Africa more than 15% cost, right? Sending money from Kenya to Ghana, just calculate it, just try it out. If we reduce remittance costs by, let's say, 5% on a volume of 600 plus billion, we are talking about $30 billion in savings. Diaspora savings are estimated to be more than $500 billion. 1/10 of that, if you're able to mobilize through diaspora bonds, that's $50 billion, already adding up to $80 billion, right? And then if you reduce the costs, fees that migrant workers, especially low-skilled migrant workers, pay to labor agents, all of it is illegal. That fee, if you reduce it, you can also mobilize another $20 billion. I did not even mention philanthropy yet, diaspora philanthropy. So that's a $100 billion financing idea per year. Let me stop with that for now. I'll take on some other issues later.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I think it's always a pleasure to hear you talking about these issues. Moving next, we've been talking about the role of innovation, fintech, and so on. And then this morning also, we've heard the experience from India mentioning that many startups that diaspora came back to initiate these startups in the digital sector. So, Mr. Kudjo, as the CEO of the leading Pan-African fintech company, so you have a first-hand experience in leveraging technological innovation for financial inclusion. So, in your views, how can African fintech, through technological innovation and digital solution, unlock the potential that we've been talking about of remittances, but also diaspora investment?
Yeah, thank you very much. First, I want to thank Dilip. Of the 1.5 million views of his talk, probably a few 100,000 came from my company alone. You have been a true inspiration for the work that we do. And I also want to just add a little bit to the misconception that we're talking about earlier, and which is that diaspora and remittance is primarily a North-South affair. And when we stand and we talk about remittance in Africa, it is about how we make it easier and cheaper for someone in New York to send money to Accra. I think Madame Duarte mentioned that my country, Benin, actually received half of the remittances from its neighbors. And if we follow, migration, actually 7 in 10 people living a place in Africa ended up in another place in Africa. Yeah. And as we sit here in Kenya, as you mentioned, there's actually no easy way to send money to Benin, if you can do it at all. And if you can do it, it is in the 15% that Dilip was talking about. So one of the misconceptions is that African countries and African governments and African central banks are only at the receiving end. And I would have loved to hear more from the central bank, the governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, on how to make Kenya a better sending market for all the migrant and diaspora people who are living in Kenya as well. So I think that has to be present in the conversation. Now, coming back to your question, so we started the company MFS Africa on the premise literally of making borders matter less. And that means, and our scope of work was primarily Africa. And it is really, how do we leverage the power of technology, what we have seen in countries like Kenya, but across Africa, where the movement of money between cities and rural areas have been dramatically changed by the power of mobile money. How do we extend that across borders, across the continent? And that has been primarily our work. And I think 12, 13 years in, I'm happy to report that a lot of progress has been made. And we continue to believe that the future of how to solve this still belongs to mobile. And there are a few reasons for that. The first one is that migrants do not only need remittances, they actually need connection. So when you leave your country, you need to remain connected, and you need to continue participating in social discourse. You need to stay in touch with loved ones. And mobile or digital technology at large has played a huge role on how you do that across Africa and around the world today. And it's because of that, because mobile, and none of us leave our country now thinking, maybe we need to change everything about the way we communicate. More and more people will keep their WhatsApp account. And when they move from Johannesburg to Lagos or from Lagos to London, they will continue to communicate with this same identity, I will call. We believe the same will continue to be true for money, that we will get to a point where people will be able to move abroad with their M-Pesa account, and they will be able to continue, interact, and remain connected in the environment. So a lot of our work is going into that direction, and again, as I said, I'm happy to report that we are seeing a lot of progress. Where I am a bit worried, and a lot of people talk about how do we accelerate the progress toward the SDG, I'm worried about another misconception, which is that profit is evil. I think we're coming to this probably too much from our heart, not recognizing that actually to make this work, it requires investment. And investment requires profit that you can reinvest. And right now, if you take I would say, remittance industry at large, it is a difficult thing right now. And you will see, those remittance companies on the stock market who are actually suffering from that. And it's not just the remittance companies at the top, it's the whole chain, including things around regulation and how do you do KYC, how do you keep sanction compliance and all that. So I think where I'm worried is that the industry is not being allowed overall to generate profit to be able to reinvest. And sometimes that is because also probably too much intervention from donors. And I'm saying this well aware that, MFS Africa, we are also a recipient of a grant by IFAD, which we are working on, on specific cases to advance financial inclusion. But as an industry in general, if we're going to have a hard talk, we have to also embrace the need for profit from which you can reinvest. I came from the telecommunication industry background, and I think it's largely recognized that that's probably the last real wave of integration, of inclusion that has happened in Africa. But it happened with SIM card costing $100 in Lagos. And of the profit made from that, now it is possible for everywhere across Africa that you will have a base station in the most rural areas in the continent. I'm not advocating that we need to go back and charge $100 on remittances, but I think we have to have hard talk about the need for the industry to actually let the economic reality plays out.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that you mentioned the issue about the importance of remittances within the continent, because these are things that one of the misconceptions that the remittances are coming from abroad. So, and then also you mentioned the issue of the difference between from the receiving.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start, so I will ask you to take your seats, please. I'll just end. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to take your seats, please. If you're in the room, I can see those that are standing up. So if I can ask the people in the back, if they don't mind to please sit. Hans Boone, please. Ladies and gentlemen, so our apologies. I know we're running behind. We're going to try to catch up as we go. But before we go into lunch, we still have this presentation that it is, I think, extremely important to have to contextualize the discussions that we're going to have during the day and tomorrow. And of course, the aspect of digital remittances revolution approaching 2030, which will be following this presentation. The presentation is about RemitScope, remittances to and from Africa, market landscape 2023 and beyond. It is about data. I may ask, please, if you can just interact and stop the interaction if it's possible. Thank you very much for your understanding. What we saw 20 years ago is that remittances were anecdotal, be at government level or market level. Everybody sort of have heard about this aspect of sending remittances home. Some were astonished about the numbers, but everyone thought that it was anecdotal. Things have changed since then. We learn a lot about the flows, the reality, what this means for so many member states receiving these flows. We learn a lot about cost. There's actually an SDG related to cost. And we hoped that this cost could come down from a 20% of cost of sending remittances, where we are today, depending on whatever continent that is dealing with this, we see something that goes beyond the two-digit number. However, what we realize is in our search for lowering costs, providing more impact of these flows, more is needed. And that more includes a lot of things, but one of these is data. We mentioned about the private sector, how important it is, how important their role is in maximizing remittances. Well, if you want private sector to enter, they do require better data. 20 years ago, the market would look very differently. We have maybe 2, 3 players in it. Today, we have a myriad of players in a specific marketplace or corridor, but more data is needed towards that. With data, we can do a lot more. Of course, in terms of addressing better regulatory framework, consumer behavior, market segmentation, business models, among others. And this is why a few years ago, IFAD and the European Union or Commission decided to build a tool that would address this lack of data that we call RemitScope. It is a market intelligence data portal that it is supposed to take us to the next level of what the private sector or entities in the remittances ecosystem would like to see or enter into. We're facilitating also that analysis with a set of indexes to try to stimulate, should you go into that business or not? Is there an untapped market that you should know about? So we engage into that effort and analysis for the African continent. I'm happy to say that we're expanding this now to other areas of the region, but today it is about Africa, so this is what we're going to present to you. So I really don't want to be longer than this. We're going to give you just a little video to present what RemitScope does, and then we're just going to use it and present you the African market, remittances market, with the information extracted from RemitScope. So without further ado, I will invite our colleagues to put on the video, and then I will, right after this, let Sarah Hugo from DMA to do the presentation also on behalf of IFAD.
In today's global economy, the movement of money across borders plays a crucial role in supporting families, driving economic growth, and fostering financial stability. Introducing RemitScope, your comprehensive data analysis platform for remittances. RemitScope is a powerful tool designed to provide invaluable insights into the world of remittances, empowering you to make data-driven decisions with confidence. With RemitScope, you gain access to real-time data and analytics, allowing you to monitor and analyze remittance flows globally. RemitScope, your trusted partner in remittance data analysis. Unlock the power of data and transform the way you understand and leverage remittance flows.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be here today, and thank you to IFAD for the invitation to speak. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you insights from RemitScope to give an overview of the remittances market into and intra-Africa, and looking at some of the drivers and trends drawing on the latest data available. RemitScope compiles over 140 indicators from a variety of different sources that are relevant and of interest when analyzing a remittances market. This includes data on migration, remittance flows, pricing, financial inclusion, access, and the competitive environment. And this is arranged over 5 different thematic dashboards with 5 indexes and 54 country profiles. And it's perhaps in these 54 country profiles that the real value is, where all of the data on one country is consolidated and compiled into one country profile in a standardized format. As with anything remittance data related, we recognize and appreciate that there are challenges with the quality of data, with the consistency, and with the quantity of data. And this is something that I know that we will be discussing more in this forum. But I would also like to make an appeal for all of us to work together and to put in place the systems and the frameworks and the processes that are needed in order to close these gaps and in order to improve the quality of data. And as new data becomes available, so will RemitScope also evolve in order to showcase this new data. As Pedro said, at the moment, RemitScope is just focused on Africa, but over the coming months, it will also be RemitScope Latin America and Central America, and also RemitScope Asia. It is a tool that we very much look forward to you using. The site is now live. It went live last night. So there will still be, it's a beta phase, and it will continue to be improved over the coming weeks and months. Please also note before you all reach for your phone and for your tablets that it's not currently available on mobile, so only on desktop at the moment. Thank you. So my aim today is to give you a snapshot, just an overview of the data. And what I'm going to share with you today is you probably know it already, we've heard a lot of it already, and you know it instinctively from operating in the market. But what the RemitScope tool gives you is that data to back it up and to analyze it according to your needs when you need it. So broadly, I'm going to cover some aspects from the different thematic dashboards, including around diaspora and migration, remittances, pricing, financial inclusion, digitization, payout options and access points, and the operating environment. But I promise I'm not going to spend too long. So here is an illustration of some of the data that you can hope to find on RemitScope. Apologies if it is difficult to read, but we really wanted to give you an idea and a flavor for what is available on the site. According to UNDESA, that collects and publishes data on international migrant stock, there were 40.4 million Africans living outside their countries of origin in 2020, which is the latest data that we have. This represents about 3% of the total African population. These figures are likely, and also in many cases known, to be a significant underrepresentation of the true size of the African diaspora and those that may be sending remittances home, as it doesn't include the second and third generation diaspora or irregular migrants as well. The countries from the data with the largest diaspora are Egypt, with 3.6 million people, Morocco with 3.2 million, and South Sudan 2.6 million, and Somalia. The country hosting the largest number of Africans was France in 2020, with 4.3 million Africans living there. And the countries with the fastest growing number of emigrants are South Sudan, the Gambia, Eritrea, Nigeria, and Cameroon. So RemitScope also allows us to look at the data not just at a country level, but to break it down into corridor level where it is available. And here we can see from the chart on the top left that the largest corridors are the Algerians moving to Morocco, Algerians and Moroccans moving to France, Burkinabe to Côte d'Ivoire, and South Sudanese to Uganda. Particularly interesting to note, I think, is that, and I think we heard it mentioned earlier today, is that most of the African diaspora are actually living in other African countries. There are, according to the UNDESA data, 20.7 million migrants from Africa in other African countries, 3.3 million in North America, 4.8 million in Asia, and 11 million in Europe. So over half of the migrants from Africa are living in other African countries, with Côte d'Ivoire being a main destination country, as well as a lot of inter-regional migration within West Africa and South Africa as well. So I think Nomad have just released some new data last night. It's not up yet, but it will be by tomorrow. So this is based on the previous data. But as we've heard already, an estimated $100 billion is estimated to have flowed in 2022 into Africa, which is a compound annual growth rate of 12% over the past 3 years. As Dilip, I think, said earlier, you can't keep them down. So in considering what has been happening in the global economy in these COVID and these post-COVID times, with high oil prices, the Russia-Ukraine war, and the cost of living crisis that we're experiencing, this once again shows the incredible resilience of remittances in the face of adversity. It is also interesting to note from the graph at the bottom left that Egypt, Nigeria, and Morocco account for nearly 65% of total remittance inflows into Africa. Taking a regional perspective, North Africa is the largest receiver of remittances onto the continent, receiving 48.7 billion, followed by West Africa, receiving 33.6 billion. So the top remittance receiving countries, according to the World Bank in 2022, Egypt, Nigeria, Morocco, and Ghana. The most dependent economies are the Gambia, Somalia, Comoros, and Lesotho. And there are 16 countries in Africa where remittances account for more than 5% of their GDP. The chart on the left shows an index that has been specifically developed for RemitScope that takes into account a number of different weighted variables in order to illustrate the countries where remittances are the most important. Informal remittances are something that we quite often hear about and we've heard about earlier today, and they still play an important role in Africa, especially in some corridors. By their very nature, the amounts of remittances sent through informal channels is unknown, as they are by their very nature unrecorded. However, at RemitScope, what we try to do is to gather all of the data and all of the information that is available and put it all in one place. So here we can see that there is data from, for example, estimates from the National Bank of Kenya, from the Central Bank of Ethiopia, and from Uganda that has been gathered through surveys. As data is updated and improved, so too will that be reflected in RemitScope. RemitScope also presents remittance inflow data and outflow data as well. We've got both send and receive split out on the portal. But Remitscope also presents remittance inflow data at a corridor level, including both the estimates that are published by the World Bank in their bilateral remittance matrix, and also compiling and publishing data by the few central banks that also share it. It's interesting to note from the bilateral remittance matrix that it is estimated that inflows from other African countries is estimated around 20 billion USD, so roughly 20% of total remittance inflows, despite half of African migrants living in other African countries. We know that there are big challenges with intra-African data, and also to some extent with intra-African remittances, as we've heard earlier, the costs involved and the high use of informal. As I mentioned, Remitscope is also compiling remittance data published by central bank at a corridor level. A few central banks in Africa are really taking the lead, such as Kenya, Morocco, Senegal, South Africa and Ethiopia, and are publishing remittance data broken down by corridor. We know that other central banks are also looking to improve their collection methods and systems to also produce and share this data. Remitscope is compiling and will continue to publish central bank remittance data broken down by corridor, as we really hear that this is responding to the needs of policymakers and industry. In terms of pricing, historically remittances into Africa have been expensive, and it continues to be the most expensive region to send money to globally at an average of 8.9% of the send amount. Remittance prices is mainly collected through the World Bank's Remittance Prices Worldwide website, and also through GSMA, and some through Prime Africa pricing. It's worth mentioning that when we talk about the average cost of sending money, we are including the fee paid by the sender, and then also the margin on the foreign exchange that's made by the service provider, which is often hidden to the user. Generally, the trend in pricing into Africa shows a slow downward trend, but at the current trajectory, we are going to miss the SDG 10.C of 3% at this rate of decline. As you would expect, although these lines look relatively smooth, especially at a kind of average continental level, there are some countries where pricing really is quite volatile, and even in some countries where pricing has been going up over the last year. Remitscope will track the trends every quarter, and as we mentioned, at a country level, you can have a look at these trends at a country level. Here we have on the top left the high-cost corridors. So there really are still some high-cost corridors, as seen in this first chart, even when we remove the banks from the sample. Some of the intra-African corridors are still expensive, for example, Tanzania to Uganda and Rwanda, and sending money to the Gambia. It's interesting to observe that when we break down the pricing by channel, as we do in this bottom graph, for example, whether money is being sent cash to cash, or whether it's through digital channels or whether through mobile, this is where we begin to see much lower prices. So having seen in the last slides the cost benefit of digitization, here we look at financial inclusion, or the ownership of a financial or mobile account, as an indicator of how many of the adult population can use and take advantage of the benefits of digital remittances services and the benefits that they afford, not just in price, but also in terms of access, convenience, security, and access to other financial services. Financial inclusion, according to the Findex survey, or mainly the Findex survey, has been growing across the continent. The average is now 51% of the African population in 2021, up from 20% in 2015. So whilst this is significant improvement, there is still significant progress to be made, and I think that digital divide that we were hearing about earlier. A real driver of financial inclusion has been through the uptake of mobile money. Kenya, Ghana, Gabon, and Uganda are reported to have the highest levels of mobile money account ownership as a percentage of the population. In terms of payout options and access points, Remitscope also tracks and shares information on the different market players, as well as the payout and send options and access points. And the good news is that there are many options for paying and sending remittances, whether it's through banks, the post office, mobile money providers, microfinance institutions, foreign exchange bureaus. They all have a role to play in this value chain. And it is now much easier for international money transfer operators and fintech to create a network in Africa because of the role that aggregators are playing. They've harnessed the growth in mobile money and other agents, and there are now more options for customers, more locations to send money to, and it's much easier for the international money transfer operators to establish a network for paying out very easily. Finally, RemitScope has also used dedicated RemitScope researchers from the different regions in Africa to collect information on the licensing environment and regulatory environment, and also on other market indicators that might be useful when assessing remittance markets. For example, some of these that you can see here have been compiled into an index that brings together 8 different indicators. For example, looking at restrictions on outbound remittances, whether there are exclusive relationships between RSPs and agents, whether the country's on the FATF black or grey watch list that may affect de-risking, whether there's a parallel market or black market for local currency that affects the demand for formal remittance services. So that brings me to the end of my presentation and the snapshot overview of remittances and remittance-related data in Africa. We do have a stand at stand number 16, I think, so please come and see us. RemitScope is a work in progress and will continue to evolve as the community demands new insights and as new data becomes available. As you can see, there's a lot of data in here, but there is still a long way to go, and it really requires collaboration. So please use the tool, check the data for your country, provide us with updates where you have them, tell us what you want to see on the tool, and make sure that RemitScope is part of your regular activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah, for this. And again, not on mobile right now, so only on PC you will be able to get it. We're trying to catch up on the time, so we will go directly for the next panel. So I would like to invite the moderator for the next panel, Ginidis Srinivas. He's the Senior Financial Sector Specialist, Payment System Development Group of the World Bank. And I will invite also the panelists. So if you can come from EcoBank, Richard Meseko, RIA Financial Services, Malik Sek, Safaricom Kenya, Esther Waititu, and Smart Africa, Didier Knu. And I always have a problem with your name. So let me not butcher it. Didier, I will ask you the name as to be pronounced. Can we have the banners?
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here with my distinguished panel. Let me introduce my panelists. To my left is I'll ask my panelists to introduce themselves because I seem to be missing some of the bio, especially from my colleague from M-Pesa.
So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Esther Waitito. I am in charge of M-Pesa. The title that we use at Safaricom is Chief Financial Services Officer. I'm a career banker, having been in banking for over 20 years. And so coming into the mobile space, which is an extension of financial services, is quite exciting. So I'm very happy to be with you all today to share what we are going to be doing together to drive remittances. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Janity. My name is Malik Sek. I'm Managing Director for Africa for RIA Money Transfer International, #2 worldwide in money transfer. I'm based in Dakar, managing the whole continent with a larger team. RIA is present in 180 countries, operating with a lot of partners throughout the world. Previously, I used to work in a regional money transfer company based in Dakar, named Money Express, operating in Western Africa and being kind of a gateway for many international companies. And since 2010, heading the regional office for Africa and based in Dakar.
Very good morning to everyone. Bonjour, for those who speak French. My name is Didier Ngui-Kimfura, Chief Strategy and Growth Officer at Smart Africa. Smart Africa is a Pan-African organization which was born from 10 years ago and now accounting for 39 countries in Africa, which is driving digitalization of the continent. Chaired by President Kagame at the board and regrouping all the head of state at the board of the organization. The organization is driving several initiatives, cross-border initiative, digitalization in Africa. Prior to that, I worked for the government of Rwanda for a few years as Director General in charge of ICT, and I also worked in academia and other government, government position. Thank you, IFAD, for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hello. Good afternoon. Richard Miseko is my name. I am head of global sales for Rapid Transfer International. Rapid Transfer International is the Pan-African remittance platform that was recently launched by EcoBank in Europe, facilitating migrant remittance from 25 countries in Europe to Africa in all countries covered by EcoBank, including Ethiopia that we just recently launched. So we transferred to 34 countries now in Africa. So EcoBank indeed is leading the way in playing an active role in the remittance space in order to force down the cost of remittances within the continent, which is estimated to be the very highest globally. So EcoBank is leading the way in that regard. Prior to EcoBank, I was country director for World Remit in Canada and one of the founding management team of the remittance platform, where I had the responsibility of developing the fully online dedicated remittance network across the world, not only in Africa, but also in Asia and Latin America. So now, of course, we all commonly know World Remit. It has become a global brand. So that was what I was doing prior to coming to EcoBank, to replicate the experience of establishing a most successful remittance platform within the continent and also for migrant workers in Europe and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you to all my panelists. So as you've seen from the title of the discussion today, we have reaching revolution in remittances in terms of digitalization. Now, what we have witnessed during the COVID pandemic is that the share of digital remittances has really gone up. But now, after the COVID pandemic, it is stagnating or it has come down on a global basis. Data reveals that out of the share of digital or mobile money remittances has in fact come down from 5% to 4.7% now. Though in terms of costing, what we find is that mobile money, sending mobile money on the sending side is much cheaper, and the same holds good when receiving money in an account on the disbursing side as well. Now, even knowing that there is an advantage in using accounts either to send or to receive remittances, there is this trend that we are seeing that the growth in digital remittances is not going the way it should have gone. It is continuing to stagnate. And as you saw from the remittances prices worldwide database, on a global basis, the cost of sending a remittance is now 6.24%. And within Africa, it's of course even much higher than that. So the G20 target of reaching 5% is still a far way off. And even to go to the SDG target of 3% is still going to be taking a lot of efforts from all the players, including the regulators and the service providers. So with this brief introduction, let me kickstart the discussion with my panelists. And I would first ask Malik from RIA to come in. Malik, what are the most recent changes in the money transfer ecosystem on the sending side? And what are you seeing as the trend towards digitization post-COVID?
Yes, thank you, Genesee. Just to tell you that this panel, for instance, is a good illustration of what COVID has, as positive consequences. EcoBank is partnering with us with Rapid Transfer. We are partnering with their, M-Pesa. COVID has helped to change the way we're doing business. Today, we are not consider ourselves as competitors with their fintech, with banks. We're all working together because we have something that they don't have, which is the network, the payout network, and they had, at the send side, a digital tools to initiate transaction. And since COVID occurred, we've seen not the flow has substantially increased. If we consider sub-Saharan Africa, we had an increase. If we remove Nigeria, because of the currency issue, dollar payment, sub-Saharan Africa has substantially increased after, during COVID. We was very scared, when COVID happened in, I think, February 2020, we all was scared because we were thinking, because of lockdown, that we would be even losing our job. But what we realized on May, we were doing more than before even COVID for two reasons. The first one was informal transaction has substantially diminished. No airport, no travel, and migrant was obliged to go to formal channel to do remittance. And also digitals came, we accelerate, we as RIA and many other money transfer companies accelerate our digital platform, having digital everywhere in the sending countries, and migrant was capable to send from home. And the third reason was the partnership between us and fintechs, companies sitting in Europe and in Africa to ease also transaction. So that was, Jenny, what happened before and after COVID. Thank you.
Yes, could we hear from you from the mobile money perspective?
Yeah, thank you. So let me build on that. I think from a mobile money perspective, what we saw was accelerated growth from an M-Pesa point of view. And it's interesting when I listened to the speakers earlier this morning, thinking about how we need to invest in the infrastructure and to give back. I think the infrastructure then became a very, very critical part in terms of enabling us to grow. So M-Pesa has invested in a very strong agent network. And that agent network is a backbone of how we're then able to get cash in and cash out. The partnerships that were built, and with a lot of people in this room, we started in 2009 with Western Union, and today we have at least 25 relationships with different remittance companies. What that has simply meant is that there are more points that are able to bring money into the system. It means then the distribution, because everyone has a phone, makes it then easier for people to receive money on the phone. And a couple of things happened during COVID. Because we were not able to be in touch with each other physically, it meant that the use of digital tools became more accelerated. So that saw a lot of growth in terms of use of mobile money and increase in remittances during that period. But also another thing which was more, from a government perspective, is also price. So price came down, and actually that accelerated the affordability of processing a lot of the transactions. It's literally the beginning of this year when, for example, money moving into M-Pesa from the bank started being charged. And in that time, between 2020 and 2023, we have seen the number of mobile money transactions, the volumes, increase 3 times. So that means that if we have the right pricing point and the right outlets, this will continue to grow. So from a Safaricom mobile money perspective, we believe that has accelerated. I think the thing that we need to invest in for the future is really around making sure the experience for the consumer is much better. You'll recognize that a lot of our customers are using feature phones, 2G phones. The technology has continued to change and evolve, so there's a lot more that's available. So that continues to be our focus, to make sure that we're then improving the service and making sure that the pricing point continues to be the right one.
Richard, your perspective from the commercial bank.
Yes, indeed. During COVID, we saw a significant uptick in the digital channel. Well, EcoBank, the largest commercial banking network in Africa, and is also recognized as a leading digital bank, and has even won an award in that regard. Specifically, during COVID, we saw a significant uptick in the adoption of the digital channel of the EcoBank product that is called Express Account. Express Account is a proprietary product of EcoBank that imitates the mobile money service. And the significant thing about that really is that it removes the illusion of low cost of the mobile money service. Because mobile money service, yes, it's very accessible, and cost will seem comparatively low when you use it. But realistically, you find out that when you encash, you pay fees. And ultimately, you don't encash the full value of your remittance. But the EcoBank Express account allows you not only to benefit from the mobile money service, but to also encash your remittance value 100%. And then, of course, there's also the point about the product that is called agency banking, which is, in other words, proximity banking. EcoBank brings banking to the people in order to be able to get them financially included for inclusive prosperity. So we're gone are the days whereby banks is something far away and most intimidating institution. Now EcoBank brings it close to the people, and it's more relatable through agency banking. Although ultimately we saw that despite the uptick during COVID in the digital adoption, we saw a situation whereby after COVID, people relapsed to their there are former ways of doing things. And that's a significant point that we can drill into to find out how come, people who appear to have adopted the digital mode of doing business have now relapsed to their former ways. What is wrong? What is the missing link? And I think we can have the opportunity to also examine that. Thank you.
Didier, could you share from a Smart Africa perspective, please?
Thank you. I think to respond to the question, indeed, COVID has been an accelerator. When COVID started, a lot of government pushed for adoption of cashless solutions, banking, mobile money, and so on. I'll give an experience from the Rwandan perspective, because I was during lockdown, most of the lockdown I was in Rwanda. Every 2 weeks, government was releasing a cabinet resolution about instruction around COVID, but there was always a sentence or a couple of sentences saying that the use of cash is not allowed. We should actually use mobile payment. So this was a big push. I think that was the biggest push that with the risk of infection related to the manipulation of cash was a big booster, and we saw several hundred of fold in terms of increase of payment. Payment to merchant was literally done over merchant codes, and this has not been just a trend for Rwanda. It has been, I guess, across many places in the continent. So here I'd like just to bring the role of government and the weight they can really bring on the table when they adopt and when they push for the adoption of mobile payment. And now when you look specifically on cross-border payment, I think this also, especially remittances beyond the domestic payment, there was also a multiplier effect. More and more partnership took place between, as Esther was alluding, the number of partnership continue to grow. There's more and more cross-border payment happening. We have organizations like MFS Africa and others that came. But we also saw a rise of fintech solution coming. We heard about World Remit and many more fintech that really position cheaper, faster solution, and it increased also the amount of remittances. Of course, there are still barriers, because it starts with the inclusion and digital inclusion. For example, for you to be able to make a payment, you need at least to have a device. To be able to at least to make mobile money payment. And we still have a lot of people. There's a limitation that could not be broken because of some of these digital inclusion challenges. But having said that, I think it's, after COVID, there's been a bit of, some people prefer to use cash for different reasons, because I think the biggest competitor here is cash, right, to digital payment. So, and for different reasons, people still use cash. But I think generally there's been quite a growth, and I'm sure our fellow panelists here can share with us some numbers about how it has actually grown. So globally, I believe we've seen a growth, but with a small slowdown over the last few years since the pandemic has started being under control.
Thank you, Didier. Now that leads us to our second question, which I would ask, which I'd like to pose to my panelists. Why is it that we have seen the advantages of going digital being less expensive, but why is it that, do the panelists have they observed whether there are a particular segment of customers which prefer cash, so they have gone back to cash, and if so, what do they think are the challenges that they're facing? Starting with you, Richard.
Yes, thank you, Srini. Indeed, that's a most pertinent question, and it's also, goes back to the point I was trying to make earlier about the significant percentage of people who had gone back to their former ways. In my own analysis, I just realized that It is simply because some of these technology that we seek to adopt is not necessarily rooted in the people's ways of life. It's not rooted in their culture. You know, it's something that goes along the line of the copy and paste imitative culture that don't necessarily have the people buy in. And so we cannot overemphasize the relevance of going digital. And I like it when a lot of emphasis is placed on the need to not leave anybody behind. So if we don't have to leave anybody behind, we have to examine how we can still, facilitate the acceleration of the digital adoption. So what I have seen from my, personal experience on the field is that ultimately there is a development process that cannot be circumvented. You don't just jump, you don't just impose the digital adoption on people, but you guide it, you assist it in such a way that, you could create a customer experience center where, you'll be surprised how even educated people are challenged when it comes to, taking the digital option. And so that goes to underscore the need for the personal assistance that people require. Sometimes the tagline of advertisement for digital adoption is that, oh, you can send money from the comfort of your home. But we have a lot of people who don't want to send money from the comfort of their home. They want the personal, the physical contact, the love of the warmth of human contact. And so as a result of that, a customer experience center will provide a space where they can come and relate to human. It's not asking them to bring cash, but it's just asking them to be assisted to take their first baby digital steps, if I may say, until gradually they will then become more confident in using the digital option and become fully independent. This is one of the ways, and of course they can be also the hybrid form where people could start transactions online and then complete it offline, gradually until they will just, be inspired. They will have the confidence to then do everything digitally from end to end. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Esther, are you seeing any particular customer segments which are still preferring cash? What is your experience?
So yes, there are some segments where we see this preference for cash. The very first one, which I think is also relevant for the audience here today, is also for the displaced individuals, the immigrants. They prefer to receive their money in cash. That is as a result of sometimes not having the right documentation. KYC is alive. It's something that we all must comply with. And for a lot of these displaced people, especially, with what's happening in Sudan and as an example and everything, it then means cash then becomes the way of operating. So that is a segment that continues to trade, quite heavily in cash. And also as we see, some level of MSMEs also starting to scale in their businesses, as they also seek to build the necessary documents that will allow them to trade, we also see that there is some level of cash that happens in that space. And I do think from the data that we're seeing in partnership, for example, with FSD and some work that we've done, these micro to medium enterprises, some of them actually still do a lot of their trade in cash. And there is a huge opportunity for us if we could then digitize a lot of these trade transactions for them, because a lot of it is acquiring, services and products from different corridors. Even within the region, we see that continues to happen. So the role that I think we should be playing as payment service providers is trying to ease that process and work together with our regulators to see what can we do for those groups that are a little bit more disenfranchised. I think the other thing from my perspective in terms of why also the use of cash is also high is that there is a responsibility that we have around digital and financial literacy. In terms of showcasing the benefits that come alongside with that. And I think in the person-to-person, the P2P space, and the consumer space, that's well understood. But when we move it to the next level where we're looking to do trade, have we worked sufficiently with traders and these macro enterprises to give them the tools that they need? So there is a role that we have to play in terms of both digital and financial literacy. And there's an interesting statistic. You did ask about statistics. Looking at Kenya, we found that we have about 15% of MSMEs that are using any form of digital services. So that means there's a huge opportunity out there, and that means that without that literacy, it means then the ability to digitize and sell those benefits also becomes a little bit more challenging.
Thank you, Esther. Malik.
Yes.
From the remittance provider perspective.
I think that we should consider the profile of our customers. You have two types of migrants. Migrants working in international companies like IFAD or sitting in New York, in Rome. Those guys have their family on site, they have a mortgage, they have a Mercedes. They're not our main road. Our main road are low-educated migrants. Those who are selling hats in Broadway in New York, cleaning the metro in Paris. For those migrants, their family are back home. They're living usually alone, and the whole family are in their home country. And those profiles are not very internet-based. They're very cash-based. Mainly the old migrants that used to use cash, and they say, it works, why should I change? However, we've realized that, digital is substantially increasing, even though we didn't see in our books no cannibalization until recently. The cash was growing and digital also was growing. 2 double-digit in digital and even 2 double-digit in cash. No cannibalization for now, but we are observing a shift from cash to digital, little by little. And the partnership we are signing with all those fintech, helping them to cash out. Because to use digital, it would be good to have also at the lending side a network acceptance. In Senegal, for instance, digital is growing very fastly because we have a large network acceptance. In Kenya, it should be the same. But if you send money in Morocco, for instance, when you receive it in your mobile, you immediately cash out your transaction. And we should know also that the success of international companies, success of those traditional companies is still network. I think M-Pesa is the most successful mobile in the world, and they do have the largest payout network in the world. So it's extremely important to have that cash out network to ease, remittance from the send side. We are partnering with Remit, with Remitly, with the MFS very soon, because they benefit from our cash out network. In the rural areas, we have the network, but you don't have a lot of acceptance network. Like people use money, for this social ceremony. The note has some values. When you go to any African ceremony in Kenya or in Senegal, or when people give money to, they cannot send, like a mobile thing. They use cash to give. It has a social meaning in our culture. So, but I believe that digital will keep increasing because of the convenience and easy to use, because of an easy KYC. You just KYC yourself once, and you can send many times. In our network, we have to KYC anytime you came, because there is an obligation to identify the beneficiary and the senders for every single transaction, which is not the case for digital, where you are KYC'd once, and then you can use it, wherever you want. Thank you.
Yeah, what is your perspective from the experience after COVID? Do you see customer segments going back to cash?
Well, I think it's on both sides. Some people adopted it and it's now part of their life. Again, here I'll talk as a citizen. Today, I carry less cash than I used to carry before. Most of the merchants today in Rwanda and the same in Kenya and many other parts in Africa, people are used to pay merchant with mobile money. So it has really become something that is quite entrenched, because we all remember that this pandemic lasted for over 2 years. So it's enough time to start seeing changes in our behaviors. But again, there are people who prefer still to use cash for different reasons. First of all, they are familiar to cash. They've used cash for all their life, for 20, 30, 40 years. Sometimes the 2 years is not enough for them to completely switch. Or there's also the convenience. Some people feel that they manage better when it's cash than when it's on a digital wallet. There are also people who have different, they feel that it's maybe not secure, maybe because of an experience or some news they've heard from someone they know that a payment was never delivered, and they're quite hesitant, they're not very sure, or to claim when there's an issue, maybe the support that was provided was not to the level they were expecting, so they prefer really to keep the cash. So security also, or a perception of security, of having maybe the account hijacked, money stolen, all of this is perception. Also remember that we're in an interesting era of fake news. A lot of some news can propagate very quickly, and people not even do a bit of due diligence to see if it's true or false. I'll also add on top of that charges in some market can also discourage people to use mobile money, because there'll be places where charges are quite high, and they feel that if they pay with cash, it will be actually cheaper for them than adding this charge on top, especially when the perception is that the user is actually the one paying the charge and not the merchant. And that's where actually the role of merchant is very important. We've seen beyond mobile payment, even for payment with POS, for example, when merchants feel it's expensive, they hide the POS, and they say, no, my POS is not working, and they would, so that they can receive the totality of the amount. So it's a combination of different things, but I've seen it during the pandemic, when the government worked with the private sector, here with banks, mobile money service providers. When they decided to work together, there was a huge change in terms of adoption. That's why it's very important that there's a supportive legal and regulatory framework. There is a dialogue between the private sector and the public sector to make it happen.
Thank you, Didier. So we have looked at customer behavior and customer choice as one of the issues that has probably resulted in not seeing the trend growth in the digital remittances that we would have liked to be seen. Having said that, Esther, I would like to ask from your perspective, do you find any regulatory barriers or access to payment system infrastructure, as contributory factors along with customer behavior, which is pushing customers or drawing them away from using digital means?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. Definitely when we're in the spirit of providing a service, sometimes regulations can, feel like a bit of a hindrance. So, from a regulatory perspective, I think with the introduction of multiple rules that come in, of course, anti-money laundering is a very key one, which means that we're going to be doing a lot more verification of types of payments and remittances coming in. And I think that's more for us as users to see how we can get that to be a lot more effective. Then entering the space of data privacy, right? It's a hot topic in terms of how do you then protect data? How do you ensure that as transactions are being done digitally, that we're also protecting the users of the same. So from a regulatory perspective, I think that's also another key consideration for us to think about and to see if we can get common understanding. Because if I look at the regulations, I look at the application, say in Europe, versus the application in Africa, there are variances which make it a little bit difficult in terms of getting that going. And so that can also potentially then be a barrier if we don't have a unified way of managing this from a regulatory perspective. So those are the two key things I see from a regulatory perspective. It's clearly a very exciting space to be in. The central bank literally, licensed an additional 20, payment service providers. So that means it's still attractive. There's still an opportunity for people to come in. So how do we just make the playing ground, level, and how do we have the mutual and common understanding? When we look at customer trends, looking at customer trends, we've had the issues that people are reverting back to cash. But I think the real thing for customers is they want to ensure, especially now, given the economic challenges that we're facing, not just locally, but I think also internationally, where we're seeing a lot more, inflation coming through, pressure on individuals' wallets coming through. There has to be sensitivity around how we price. And so that means we're seeing pricing models around payments also need to start evolving to respond to some of those needs. And I think that's where a lot of work has to be done so that we can then, so I think the pricing models as they sit today, based on what consumers want, the message is very clear that we need to do something in order to address that. I think the other thing from a consumer perspective, consumer behavior perspective, is also the point around segmentation. One size doesn't fit all. And so we have to then think consistently around how we're serving the different niches that we're in and working with partners to be able to provide that sort of infrastructure. How do we ensure that we have sufficient merchants who our consumers can trade with? How do we make sure our agency networks remain robust? The investment in technology, using blockchain to secure payments, because a big threat that we see and a hindrance is an issue around cybersecurity. And so those are things that we actually need to start looking at to say, what can we do in order to make it a lot more secure? Because what our consumers are truly looking for is value, safety, because this payment business is a business of trust. And so I think that would be particularly key from a regulatory perspective. In terms of infrastructure, again, it's how do we get our systems to be more robust? How do we make sure that there's sufficient investment in speeding up the transactions that are processed per second? So those would be the key ones from my side. Thank you.
Richard, your perspective, please.
Yes, I would say it's a combination of all the factors, regulatory and infrastructure, and the reality of the industry. You have a situation, for example, where, talking about regulatory, you have a situation where in the UK, for example, you don't even require KYC to be able to send, if my understanding is correct, to be able to send up to £200. There's really no KYC obligation. And in Canada, that amount goes as high as 999 Canadian dollars. You don't, it is from 1,000 that you have the obligation to really identify your customer. But you will hardly find any platform, any remittance platform that does not do thorough KYC, even from £1 or just $1 Canadian dollar. So because if they say, oh, the regulation allows me to be able to at least, not do KYC up to a certain amount of money, you find out that they are going to be debanked, they are going to be de-risked. And without a bank account, you cannot operate a remittance platform. So there are all these challenges, and the bank policy is I mean, because remittance is considered as a very high-risk venture, and so the regulation and scrutiny in that regard is so very tight, and so that the remittance operators themselves tend to go far and above what is required in order to be able to remain active in this space. There's also the question about the pay-in, because again, when we speak about digital, we must recognize the fact that comparatively, the amount of money you are able to send through the digital platform is comparatively limited. You know, from end to end, it's comparatively limited to when you are able to send through other means. And the pay-in option in Africa is so very limited. I mean, we are all familiar with the payout option. We can do cash pickup, we can do deposits to bank account, we can do mobile money, and so on and so forth, or payment to other banks. But significantly, what about the pay-in option? In Africa, you find out that the most popular pay-in option is to be able to pay through apart from cash, to be able to pay through your bank card. And the processing cost of bank card is so very high. It is unlike in the major send markets, for example, where you are able to pay in not only with the card, because card, bank card really is not a most viable tool for remittance payments, because it's cash advance and the interest rate is higher and so on and so forth. But you have the options to be able to pay directly online from your bank account, which increases the volume of the amount you're able to send. You have different forms of PSPs, payment gateways, in Netherlands you have Ideal, in across Europe you have Trustly, you have so forth, and in Canada you have Interact and so on and so forth. So it is just the opportunity to be able to also enlarge that pay-in option in Africa to have, in order to be able to also promote the use of the digital platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Didier, what do you think that from a regulatory perspective that could be done to further increase digital payments? Do you see any barriers there? And I request you to keep your answer precise, because I have to give a floor to Malik as well, and we are running out of time.
Thank you. I think, indeed, remittance involve countries. And I think the first thing that we would like to encourage is actually countries to talk together, central banks. They are the one who pass those regulations and those laws. And there are a lot of restriction also that happens in remittances, forex restrictions. So having them to talk together and to create a predictable and harmonized regulation that really favor such transaction for us is one of our priorities. Important to say that we have a bit of limited interaction for the moment with central bank. We usually work closely with telecom regulators under Smart Africa, but it's an area that we've been entering, and especially also with the FCTA, the Continental Free Trade Area. So those specific on regulation, I think it's important that to have them, but also that they listen also from the private sector. Those are the people facing the customer. They have the last mile infrastructure. So it's important that it's not just a conversation between regulators, but a regulator with the service providers, so they understand the hurdle, the challenges on the ground, and adjust and provide supporting regulation for that.
Thank you, Richard. Malik, the last word from you before I conclude.
Yes, as I said earlier, there is a combination of both, as you rightly said. We should not forget the customer profile, because business is not technology driven, it's customer need. And those guys, they have their behavior, and we know the way they behave, we know where they live, and which is not the case sometimes for fintech, who are in the business, because they have, that technology, but they may not know maybe the customers. The second thing is, of course, the regulation. There's a lot of intermediary. I cannot sign directly, for instance, with an EMI licensed company. We need to go through a bank, which increase, of course, the costs, etc. And the other thing is also the lack of interoperability in the continent. You know, there is very few, I think, M-Pesa are experiencing it very recently, but nowhere except here you don't have interoperability. You know, each mobile has its own money, and which is not easy for the lending at the lending side. And the third thing is, you know, the digital business is going fast, is taking the lift, while the regulation is, you know, taking the escalator. There is, you know, they should engage central bank, you know, valuable discussion with the stakeholders, with fintech, with the MTOs, MNOs, to adjust, you know, to adapt to the regulation. And this is a real issue, you know, in terms of KYC, in terms of, you know, limits, sending limit, which is very low for those who are not fully KYC'd. And if we know our customers, we do know that most of them could not be fully KYC'd, so they can send a limited amount. And since, as I said, they used to use the, you know, the payout network, and it works, why should I change? And again, the success of any international companies in terms of remittance is the success of its network. And M-Pesa is a good example, even though it can be considered as a fintech. We all are fintech, because fintech meaning kind of a payment platform. We do have that payment platform even before fintechs, you know, so, but the network is key. The size of the network is important. Thank you.
Thank you to all my panelists. So for me, the key takeaway from this discussion has been that there is an uptake from the customers for digital remittances, but there is a lot that needs to be done in terms of overcoming the digital divide and make more efforts towards financial inclusion. Apart from that, some of the important points that have been made is the need for interoperability, need for tailoring products which suit various customer segments, and need for both domestic regulatory coordination with domestic stakeholders, as also cross-border interregulatory coordination would further help in this journey towards digital remittances. So we conclude here, and I'm not going to hold you back. I think we have taken 5 minutes of your time, so please enjoy your lunch. Thank you.
Thank you. We're just going to ask for a photo opportunity, so if you can stay on stage. And while we do that, I would like to inform the lunch will be served when you exit down the stairs. That also is the marketplace. You have 1 hour. There's limited dishes. So first one, just joking. You have 1 hour. Ah, people are listening. So we'll see you back in this room in 1 hour, basically.